So we see these cycles, like I said, on a global basis, right? A lot of M&A activity, people buying, a lot of companies, et cetera. Eventually, this slows down, and really the purge phase, kind of looks at people stepping back from the deals, focusing and trying to think about their core strategy, and then really looking at those elements that they maybe acquired during those more robust periods of things that don't fit. And so those things that don't fit are what they usually purge, divest, and make available to other buyers. So we're starting to enter that phase right now. It's not quite developed as quickly as we thought, but we do anticipate that's the direction it's headed.
So what does the purge phase mean for us here in the Middle East?
Yeah, so as we look at the Middle East, and again, I probably would maybe zoom in a little bit more, and especially in the Gulf area within the Middle East, this has definitely been one of the more kind of consistent and stable areas for M&A activity, IPO activity, et cetera. Very well funded, and very stable from a policy standpoint. I think what this presents is this is going to present opportunities for more acquisition as you see people looking to diversify some of the things that were just being talked about into AI, different technologies, et cetera. Different assets that maybe weren't available before for investment are going to become more available as we go through this purge period.
So where is deal volume strongest in the region right now?
Yeah, so really what we're seeing, the strength coming from is Saudi Arabia and UAE. Again, if you look at volume, the volume is very heavy from a Saudi Arabia standpoint. Size of deals tend to be a little bit bigger in UAE, but it's really being driven by those two areas of the region.
Can I ask you as well, PwC said recently that IPOs in Q1 in the GCC raised about 1.6 billion USD. Where are we in the IPO cycle right now, and what type of activity do you expect to see towards year end, particularly from the larger economies in the region and across the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the UAE being a case in point here, Jeff?
Yeah, everything that we've seen points to the year continuing to be strong. I mean, coming into the year, there were over 30, both either announced or mandated IPOs just at that point. Again, the majority of those coming from Saudi Arabia and UAE, and we think that's going to continue. What I think will be interesting for the region is that we do anticipate, and there's been a lot of discussion of IPO markets picking up in other regions. That probably won't happen until 2026. But again, that'll just be, more competition for investors, kind of eyeballs as well as their wallets. But again, we think the region is going to continue to be very strong in that area.
And of course, we have already seen a number of large state-backed entities coming to the market as part of a significant privatization drive that we've seen in the UAE. But Jeff, just expand on what we're seeing out of Saudi Arabia when it comes to the IPO pipeline, because this country really stands out now when it comes to IPOs. It's dominating the listings. What do you think the Saudis are doing that perhaps other countries in the region are not replicating?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I do think some of it has to do with just sort of philosophy and aggressiveness and mindset. But I think there's just a very big focus on figuring out ways to diversify, and that diversification is coming across in multiple different ways, right? Outbound investment, certainly one of them, but inbound as well in terms of opening up the market and opportunities to other investors, both in the region as well as outside of the region. And so I think that mindset and that philosophy is something that they're very strongly and aggressively putting forward with what they're doing, and it's helping to fuel what we're seeing as a pretty active market.
Right. And Jeff, just to challenge the viewpoint, though, a lot of the IPOs that we have seen have been state-backed divestments. Why aren't we seeing private founders, private businesses tapping into the opportunity in the capital markets here and taking their own businesses public?
Yeah, and I think that's a reflection really of the broader market and some of the other dynamics that we're seeing kind of outside of the region. I think that as you see some of the general market open up outside the region and IPO markets come back, you will see the private side pick up as well. So it's not surprising that would be sort of the bulk right now, given what's going on in just the broader kind of economy, business environment.
Can I ask you about some specific IPOs on our radar as well? I spoke with the CEO of Abu Dhabi's Etihad yesterday and asked him directly about the trajectory to going public. Of course, he said that this will all come back to the needs of the shareholder ADQ, but what's your take on the Etihad IPO in particular? Are there any factors that might be influencing that delay? And also taking a step back here, Jeff, because this would be, as I understand it, the first major airline listing in nearly 2 decades, what impact do you think that would have on that sector in particular? Do you think it could be a catalyst for additional public listings as a result?
Yeah, I think to your second question, I think it definitely could be a catalyst, right? It's definitely an industry that is going through changes, right? I think trying to kind of still figure out their way a little bit, even though COVID's kind of far behind us, but trying to look at that. So I think it'll be a catalyst from that standpoint. I think one thing in general to keep in mind with IPOs is that the IPO process it isn't fast. There's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of readiness, there's a lot of work that needs to go into getting ready for the IPO. And so, I think some of what you're seeing with the, in particular this deal, but really with any of them, is just that process playing out. And I don't know that there's anything particularly sticky about this one.
Mazda in the UAE also reportedly considering an IPO, potentially not before 2026, which is what we've heard via reports. Of course, an IPO would enable Mazda to fund renewable energy projects, big part of the UAE's broader public push here as it continues to diversify away from oil. What do you think is under consideration regarding the Mazda IPO?
Yeah, again, I think it's sort of getting it prepared and readied so that it can get the proceeds as high as possible. Obviously, trying to get that diversification play. So again, I think it's just the process playing out.
Can I ask you as well, with regards to the listings that we have seen, obviously one of the major issues that I've heard from capital market investors in the region is the fact that these markets suffer from a lack of liquidity. That's obviously a clear concern for investors who are looking to make an exit. It's also been said to me that there is somewhat of a Magulus put here when it comes to these listings. The concern being that demand is artificially generated. And Jeff, to put some data behind that, PwC also says almost 70% of GCC IPOs between 2005 and 2021 actually underperformed their local index. So what does that tell you about the quality of the capital markets in this region? Yes, there's been a big effort to improve the sophistication of these markets to improve liquidity, but perhaps that's a barrier. Is it enough?
I think it can be a barrier, but again, not to be the overly optimistic part of it, but I think that that's part of the upside opportunity, right, of these offerings. And I think that that's as investors look at them. And as you think about, again, kind of this notion of readying, and as you go to the market and the investments, what needs to get talked about is the opportunity for how some of these assets can improve, areas for opportunity, and probably talking about how some of the dollars that'll be raised from going public, how that'll get invested back into kind of cycle those returns. So, I think that that's true. I saw that same report. But again, I think that's part of the opportunity, and that's what investors will sort of be culling through as they look at these different offerings to see where the most upside and potential is to really make that a worthwhile investment.
Jeff, 2025, can international investors watching this trust the capital markets in the Gulf?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I think there's been a lot of things to point to from stability and consistency. I think that lacks in a lot of other regions right now, and it's why we've seen a lot of things slow from M&A to IPO markets. But I think that consistency and some of the stability, especially in the Gulf, that's attractive in terms of where investors are looking and where the markets are going.